This is about the reactivity series of metals and displacement. So we've already done an introduction to the reactivity series. So the most reactive is potassium, the least reactive is platinum. So potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium, aluminium are very reactive. Carbon's there for reference. Zinc, iron, tin, lead, kind of medium reactivity. Then you've got hydrogen there for reference. Then copper, silver, gold and platinum are quite unreactive. So platinum, gold are very good for jewellery because they're unreactive. So displacement is when a more reactive metal takes the place of another one in a compound. So the golden rule for displacement reactions is that a more reactive metal will displace a less reactive metal from its compound. So potassium would displace zinc in a compound of zinc sulphate because potassium is more reactive to form potassium sulphate than zinc. So in a displacement reaction, a more reactive metal displaces a less reactive metal in its compound. So, would these reactions take place and what would the products be? Silver, nitrate and iron. Well, silver's here, iron's here. So iron is more reactive than silver. So iron would actually displace silver from its compound. So then you would get iron, nitrate and silver left over. So would B happen? Would potassium, sulphate and sodium react? Potassium's right at the top, sodium's underneath it, so sodium isn't as reactive as potassium, so it won't be able to knock it out of its compound, so it wouldn't happen a reaction. Lead, sulphate and zinc. Lead is here, zinc is here, so zinc is more reactive than lead, so zinc would knock lead from its compound of lead sulphate, so you would get zinc, sulphate and lead. So a displacement reaction is one where a more reactive metal would displace a less reactive metal from its compound. So if we had magnesium, which is up here, and copper sulphate, well copper's down here, then the magnesium would knock the copper out of its compound, therefore you get magnesium sulphate and copper formed. So the magnesium displaces the copper from copper sulphate. So again, a displacement reaction is one where a more reactive metal will displace a less reactive metal from a compound. So if you drop magnesium, which is here, in copper sulphate, the magnesium is going to knock the copper out and form magnesium sulphate, and you'd get copper left behind. So magnesium plus copper sulphate. Magnesium's here, copper's here, so you'd get magnesium sulphate plus copper. Magnesium plus zinc sulphate. Magnesium's there, zinc's here, you'd get magnesium sulphate and zinc. And then magnesium and iron sulphate. Iron's here, so you'd get magnesium sulphate plus iron. With zinc, so zinc plus magnesium sulphate, well zinc's here, magnesium's there, so because magnesium's more reactive, zinc is not going to be able to knock it out of its compound, so nothing would happen. Zinc plus iron sulphate, zinc is there, iron's there, so zinc is actually slightly more reactive than iron, so zinc will knock the iron out of its compound to form zinc sulphate and iron. And then zinc plus copper sulphate, copper is there, zinc is there, so it's a lot more reactive, so you'd get zinc sulphate plus copper. And then iron plus magnesium sulphate, iron is there, magnesium's there, so magnesium is more reactive than iron, so nothing would happen. Iron plus zinc sulphate, well iron is less reactive than zinc, so nothing would happen. Last one, iron and copper sulphate. Well, iron is more reactive than copper, so iron will knock copper out of its compound and form iron sulphate and copper. And finally, copper is less reactive than magnesium, zinc, and copper is the same as copper, so none of these will react.